President Trump and his fellow Republican leaders say that they want to move forward with filling Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat on the Supreme Court. The news broke last night while the president was on stage at a rally in Bemidji, Minnesota. But despite the news sweeping through the crowd, President Trump wasn't informed until after the event.
She just died? Wow. I didn't know that. You're telling me now for the first time. She led an amazing life. What else can you say? She was an amazing woman. Whether you agreed or not, she was an amazing woman who led an amazing life. I'm actually sad to hear that. I am sad to hear that.
This morning, the president tweeted his intentions, writing, "We were put in this position of power and importance to make decisions for the people who so proudly elected us, the most important of which has long been considered to be the selection of United States Supreme Court justices. We have this obligation without delay." Our Paula Reed has obtained a list of President Trump's top 3 contenders, according to a source familiar with the White House vetting process. They are federal circuit court judges Amy Coney Barrett, Barbara Lagoa, and Amul Thapar. And Friday night, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell promised to hold a vote on President Trump's nominee. After his campaign event, also in Minnesota last night, Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden pointed to McConnell's blocking of then-President Barack Obama's final Supreme Court nomination in 2016 in his opposition to a pre-election appointment.
There is no doubt, let me be clear, that the voters should pick the president, and the president should pick the justice for the Senate to consider. This was the position of the Republican Senate took in 2016 when there were almost 10 months to go before the election. That's the position the United States Senate must take today, and the election is only 46 days off.
CBSN political contributor and Washington Post national politics reporter Sean Sullivan joins me now. Hey there, Sean. Good to have you.
Good to be with you.
So what do we know about how quickly the president wants to move forward with his nomination?
Well, initial appearances are as quickly as possible. It's clear that both at the White House and on Capitol Hill, when you look at Senate Republican leadership, you look at Republican leader Mitch McConnell, they want to go ahead with this nomination at a quick pace. Now, the question is whether the Republicans are going to try to do this before the election or after the election in a lame duck session of Congress after November 3rd. Mitch McConnell, in his statement last night, said unequivocally that the Senate is going to vote on President Trump's nominee, whoever that person may be. But he did not specify exactly when that's going to happen. Either way, however, Democrats are already up in arms, and they're saying, look, as we heard from Joe Biden there a couple of minutes ago, their argument is pretty firm and pretty uniform across the board, that voters should pick the next president, as Biden said, and then that person should nominate the next Supreme Court justice. You're already hearing a lot from Democrats, calling Mitch McConnell, calling the Republicans hypocrites because of the way that they handled Barack Obama's nomination of Merrick Garland back in 2016. So we're seeing a pretty intense political battle right now between the Republicans and the Democrats, and this comes right on the eve of the final stage of this campaign between President Trump and Joe Biden.
Yeah, Sean, I mean, we are now in September before the election. Back when Merrick Garland was appointed, it was 2016 in March. And at that point, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell was unequivocal about the need to block the nomination. He has been very clear, though, now that President Trump's appointee will, in fact, receive a vote on the floor. And President Trump, back in 2016 himself, told CNN that he thought that the next president should make the pick, that they should wait until the election was finished. As you and I both know, it would take 4 Republican no votes to block a nomination at this point. So where do things stand?
Well, right now, given those margins, it looks like Republicans probably, depending on how things shake out in the final weeks of the campaign, depending on what happens in November 3rd, might in all likelihood have the votes to do this because of that advantage in the Senate. It's not a huge advantage, as you point out, 53-47. But you would need, as long as President Trump is in office, you would need 4 Republicans to defect, and so that's why the election is crucial in this case. If you do it before the election, does that mean you lose some Republicans who are vulnerable, who are running in swing states, who might not want to vote on a Supreme Court nomination? Does it make it easier if you do it afterwards? But there are other variables if you do it after the election, because there's a Senate race in Arizona right now where the Democrat is winning in that election, and the winner of that race could be seated even before January. So that senator could be seated during the lame duck session, in which case Republicans would then only have a smaller advantage. So there's a lot of moving pieces and parts right now, but Republicans are leaning on that advantage in the Senate in hopes of moving this forward. And for Democrats, they don't have a lot of leverage in this case. They don't have a lot of Republicans they can turn to in the Senate to try to block this. You have Republicans like Susan Collins, Senator Collins of Maine, who's up for re-election. You have Senator Lisa Murkowski. Another name people have said is worth watching is Senator Mitt Romney, who has been willing to go against President Trump. We have seen over the past couple of years. But the question for Democrats is, are there 4 there that will cross over with them? So the Republicans have the power and they have the numbers right now. Democrats are trying to use political leverage. They're trying to point this out as a campaign issue and say, hey, voters need to hold Republicans to account. They're being hypocritical here, and we need to use this to apply pressure on them. And so we'll see how that shakes out in the next 46, 47 days here.
And Sean, as our viewers just saw, our control room put up a poll from recently that showed that Democrats find it much more important. And in fact, a Marquette Law School national poll from this past week shows that Democrats are more likely than Republicans to see the next Supreme Court appointment as very important in making the decision of their vote. So what impact does this news have on not only the greater presidential race, but all of those down ballot races?
Yeah, it has the potential to have a really, really big impact. Right now in the presidential race, what we've seen over the past few weeks is a debate over a couple of central issues. And the main issue that has been at the forefront of the presidential campaign debate is the coronavirus pandemic. It's President Trump's handling of it versus what the Democrats are saying and how they're saying that they would handle it. Their criticism of Trump, Trump's defense of his handling that, day in and day out has been the dominant topic of conversation in the presidential race, and not just at the top of the ticket, but down the ballot too. This is an issue that a lot of voters are tuning into. Now, all of a sudden, with this Supreme Court seat in the mix, you have something that was not talked about every day. And so how does Joe Biden respond? How does the White House respond? How does Trump respond? And then how do some of these vulnerable Republican senators down the ballot respond? People like Senator Thom Tillis in North Carolina, Senator Susan Collins, we talked about a moment ago in Maine. The Supreme Court has been an issue in her race. People like Senators Cory Gardner, Colorado, Senator Martha McSally in Arizona. You have a lot of swing state, purple state Senate races right now. And these senators, these Republican senators largely, who are on the ballot are going to be at the center of this issue because the Senate is responsible for confirming Supreme Court justices. So this has the potential to sort of upend the campaign moving forward and add a whole new dimension to these races and introduce something that has not really been, a dominant topic of conversation in any of these campaigns right now, for the most part.
And Sean, on that note, I want to circle back to something that you had said earlier, that for Democrats, what had advantaged Joe Biden had been the poor approval ratings of President Trump's handling of the coronavirus. And we know that the president had responded by trying to woo conservative and religious voters by putting forward his Supreme Court nominees and that potential list. Might this advantage the president, even if he doesn't get the nominee right now, by getting those voters who have strong moral convictions to perhaps ignore hypocrisy, ignore the contradictions about what Republicans previously said or other things that they might have problems with in order to vote for what they think is so important when it comes to the weight of the Supreme Court?
Yeah, that is a really important variable as we look at the final weeks of this race. And that argument is one that Republican strategists last night and today are hoping for. They're hoping to see a trend emerge in the next few weeks where you have people who either supported President Trump last time or otherwise on the fence this time, who don't like his handling of the pandemic, who don't like the controversies, who don't like his rhetoric on all counts, but do like conservative judges, do care about the Supreme Court. They're hoping that this is an issue that will bring some perhaps undecided voters back into President Trump's fold, and an issue that will excite the conservative base that they really, really want and need to turn out, particularly in states like North Carolina, Florida. This is something that they hope President Trump can turn to and say, look, here's an accomplishment, here's a signature accomplishment that I gave to the country. On the other side, we'll see how the Democrats respond, because their entire playbook for the last couple of months has been to focus on Trump, focus on the pandemic, focus on the sort of widespread disapproval we've seen across the board of President Trump's handling of the pandemic. So how do they respond to this? What do they do to counter the arguments that we're already seeing from President Trump? But definitely in the early days here, we are seeing and hearing some Republican strategists hope that this is the kind of thing that could help give them a little bit of an advantage. And really, they've been seeking any sort of opening in the past few weeks here, because we've seen poll after poll after poll showing Joe Biden leading Trump nationally, showing Joe Biden leading Trump in the swing states. And we're seeing these Republican senators falling behind everywhere. And a lot of Republicans have sort of looked at this map and sort of said to themselves, what do we do? It's almost like nothing is working. What they're hoping today is that this might work and this might be more effective, politically speaking, than some of the arguments that they have put forward so far, which have largely fallen flat.
All right, Sean Sullivan, thank you.
Thanks.